In a diplomatic stance that marks a significant point of tension between Japan and China, Beijing has reaffirmed its refusal to meet with Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi at the upcoming G20 summit in South Africa. The Chinese government has called on Japan to behave itself, signaling growing frustration with Japan's stance on Taiwan and regional security. As the two nations find themselves at odds, the diplomatic rift raises broader questions about the future of their bilateral relationship and the implications for global stability. The relationship between China and Japan has been a complicated one, characterized by deep historical tensions, competition for regional influence, and starkly different approaches to security. In recent years, these tensions have reached new heights, particularly regarding Taiwan. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi recently made statements linking a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan to an existential threat for Japan, triggering a sharp reaction from Beijing. In response to Takaichi's remarks, the Chinese government has taken steps to distance itself from Japan, including issuing travel advisories, halting seafood imports, and now publicly declaring that there will be no meeting between Takaichi and Chinese Premier Li Qiang at the G20 summit. There is no arrangement for Premier Li Qiang to meet with the Japanese leader, said Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning, further adding that Beijing urges Tokyo to behave with proper self-restraint. This statement from the Chinese government serves as a clear signal that any attempts at diplomacy will not be entertained unless Japan recalibrates its approach. To understand why this diplomatic freeze has escalated, one must look at the core issue, Taiwan. Taiwan, a self-governing island, is claimed by China as part of its territory. However, Taiwan has operated with a high degree of independence, and the US has maintained a policy of support for Taiwan's defense through the Taiwan Relations Act. Recently, Japan has increasingly expressed concern over Chinese military posturing near Taiwan and the broader implications of Chinese aggression. Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks about Taiwan reflect Japan's growing apprehension about China's ambitions. If there is an emergency in Taiwan involving battleships and the use of force, then that could constitute a situation threatening the survival of Japan any way you slice it, she stated in the Japanese Diet. This bold statement suggests that Japan may be willing to take action in support of Taiwan should Beijing escalate the situation. From China's perspective, these comments are seen as highly provocative. China views any foreign involvement in Taiwan as a direct challenge to its sovereignty. China's response to Japan's growing alignment with Taiwan has been swift and forceful. Beijing immediately summoned the Japanese ambassador to lodge a formal protest against Takaichi's comments. It also ramped up economic and diplomatic measures, such as suspending Japanese seafood imports and issuing travel warnings for Japanese citizens. These moves are part of a broader strategy to pressure Japan into recalibrating its stance on Taiwan and to send a message that China will not tolerate any interference in its territorial claims. The refusal of a meeting between the two leaders at the G20 summit is the latest in a series of diplomatic moves. China is signaling that it is unwilling to engage with Japan unless it alters its position on Taiwan. The tone of China's rhetoric has become increasingly harsh, with Chinese state media echoing government sentiments and emphasizing the importance of respecting China's core interests. Japan must stop interfering in China's internal affairs. Taiwan is an integral part of China, stated a commentary in the Chinese state-run Global Times. This statement encapsulates China's hardline stance on the issue and its demand for Japan to stay out of its territorial disputes. From Japan's perspective, the situation is far more complex. Japan is a staunch US ally and has been increasingly concerned about China's military expansion in the Indo-Pacific. Japan's self-defense posture, a cornerstone of its post-World War II security policy, has been under review in recent years due to the shifting regional security environment. The Japanese public has grown more supportive of a stronger defense policy, especially in light of China's growing military presence and the threat posed by North Korea. Prime Minister Takaichi's comments were made in the context of Japan's evolving security strategy. Japan's defense policies are being adjusted to counter growing threats from both China and North Korea. While Japan has avoided becoming involved in regional military conflicts in the past, the possibility of Chinese military action in Taiwan presents a clear challenge to Japan's security calculus. At the same time, Japan's economic relationship with China remains vital. China is Japan's largest trading partner, and the two countries have deep economic ties. Japan cannot afford to alienate China entirely, as such a move would have significant economic repercussions. In this delicate balancing act, Japan finds itself caught between its security concerns and its economic interests. Japanese officials have tried to clarify their position, emphasizing that they do not want to provoke China further, but also cannot afford to remain passive in the face of growing threats in the region. Japan's foreign minister has called for continued dialogue with China, even as Japan reassures the United States of its commitment to regional stability. The G20 summit, which will be held in Johannesburg later this year, was seen as an opportunity for Japan and China to engage in meaningful dialogue, particularly as both countries are key players in global economic governance. The summit provides a platform for leaders from around the world to discuss pressing global issues, including economic recovery, climate change, and geopolitical stability. However, with Beijing's refusal to engage with Japan's Prime Minister at the summit, the prospect of a productive meeting between the two leaders seems increasingly unlikely. Instead, the G20 may become a forum where tensions between Japan and China are further amplified, with both sides using the global stage to assert their positions. The summit may serve as a reminder of the growing divide between the two nations, which could have long-lasting implications for regional security and the global economy. For Japan, the lack of direct engagement with China at the G20 could be seen as a diplomatic defeat. Tokyo had hoped that the summit could provide an opportunity to repair ties with its largest trading partner, but Beijing's actions suggest that it is not ready to engage unless Japan changes its approach. On the other hand, Beijing's refusal to meet with Japan may be seen as a victory in its effort to assert its dominance in the region and prevent any challenges to its territorial claims, particularly over Taiwan. The growing tensions between Japan and China are not just about bilateral relations, they are about the broader geopolitical landscape in the Indo-Pacific. As the US-China rivalry continues to intensify, Japan is caught in the middle, trying to balance its commitments to its allies with its economic ties to China. The situation has the potential to escalate into a larger conflict if diplomatic channels continue to break down. For the international community, the stakes are high. The Indo-Pacific region is home to some of the world's most important trade routes, and any conflict between China and Japan could disrupt global supply chains, impacting economies around the world. Moreover, tensions in the region could embolden other actors, such as North Korea, to pursue their own agendas, further destabilizing the region. The United States, which has a mutual defense treaty with Japan, has been closely monitoring the situation. US officials have expressed concern over China's growing military presence in the region and have called for greater cooperation between Japan and its allies. However, Washington is also cautious about becoming too entangled in a potential conflict over Taiwan, as such a move would risk a direct confrontation with China. As the diplomatic impasse between Japan and China continues, the question remains, can diplomacy prevail? It is clear that both countries have deep-rooted interests that are difficult to reconcile. However, it is also evident that escalation is not in the best interest of either side. For Japan, the challenge is to navigate its security concerns without alienating China entirely. Japan's commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, as well as its security cooperation with the US, will continue to be key factors in its foreign policy. However, Japan will also need to consider its economic ties with China and work to avoid further tensions. For China, the challenge is to assert its regional dominance without provoking unnecessary conflict. China's leadership sees Taiwan as a core national interest, and it is unlikely to back down on this issue. However, China must also consider the broader implications of its actions, particularly with regard to its relations with Japan, the US, and other countries in the region. The future of Japan-China relations will depend on how both countries choose to navigate these complex issues. There are no easy solutions, but the need for dialogue and diplomatic engagement remains crucial. As the G20 summit approaches, Japan and China find themselves at a crossroads. The diplomatic freeze between the two nations is a reminder of the challenges that exist in the Indo-Pacific region, where security concerns, economic interests, and historical tensions collide. The question now is whether both sides can find a way to break the impasse and begin a process of dialogue that will help secure regional stability and prevent further escalation. The world will be watching closely as Japan and China decide what path to take.